PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your number one CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. Goodness gracious, and God too, it is Friday. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm David Rabinovitz, and we're joined by a great guest today, Bruce Linton.
Well, that's right. And, you know, when David comes up with these theme ideas and he said, we're going to do the art of the deal. And I said, well, the one guy I want to talk to about that is Bruce Linton, who may be has actually maybe created the biggest deal ever in cannabis history at some point. Bruce, welcome back, and it's great to see you.
No, it's good, and congrats on what you've been progressing with yourself, sir. Appreciate
that. So the art of the deal, when you think of that, Bruce Linton, what comes to mind for you?
So it's really weird, but I was on a call, so I'm involved with a bunch of companies now, and they're always trying to do transactions, and transactions or deals fall apart, not often because they're a bad idea, but because they take too long and lawyers eat them. And so part of the thing I was saying to this first-time CEO who's trying to do a deal, I said, here's how it actually has to work. You think you agree. And if you don't want to do the details, you make a joint venture. So a joint venture simply says, I'm not sure, but we'll just kick the can on being sure, and we'll have some other governance. We'll set up a board, more overhead, because we don't want to fight today. We don't want to deal with the details. I don't like that. So I said, here's what you have to do. The art of the deal is if you're going to buy a company, we'll talk about getting investment in buying a company. If you're going to buy a company, the first thing you have to get to is what's called the exchange ratio. What's that mean? Well, nobody's buying a company typically for cash. What you're going to do at the result of doing a transaction is that you're going to have a new partner in your business, and they're going to own a certain percentage of it. So if I wanted to buy PCM into my company, we'd be negotiating if you were going to have like 20% or 40% of Bruce Linton Co. That then would turn into an exchange ratio, which means how many of my shares do you get for your shares, because we all have different cap tables. If you cannot agree on that, you don't have a deal. And you should not begin due diligence. You should not begin anything until you agree on that, because once you put that pin in, you freeze that exchange ratio forever. Nobody gets to change it. What it also means is if you're a public company and you want to leak information, and I'm a private company, if we don't have the exchange ratio and I'm just going to be buying you at a future date, you make yourself puffed up. You start to sneak the word out. So the first thing on the deal is make sure you have a deal. Make sure you have an exchange ratio. Because then what you're doing isn't due diligence. You know, when you go poking around the company, you're not doing that to say, do I like this company or not? You said, I like this company. And when you're doing your due diligence, it's what I would call confirmatory. I want to confirm why I like the company, not try to decide if I like the company. If you're buying a company that you think might have intellectual property, so suppose I think you've invented something I don't know, I can never look inside your company directly, otherwise I become blinded. And what I mean by that is if I see your intellectual property directly and personally, down the road, if I don't do the deal, suppose we don't close, you have the capacity to sue me, to litigate, to say that I've actually stolen your ideas. So part of the structure then is you can use a third party. Like we used to use a law firm called Baker's Botts. And what we do is get them to look at, and I've done it since I've left Canopy, I've used them, I think 2 or 3 times, look inside the company and write me a report on their intellectual property without telling me exactly what it is, but whether or not you think it's going to stand up to patent fights, et cetera. So there's ways to learn what you're going to get without making it such that you are forced to do the deal because you know stuff that you can't unknow. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like don't get in a spot that you've poisoned your own capacity to act. So I think those are kind of key things I pushed on people. Now, if you're going to have money come in, so if you want to have investors, 2 things I learned over the years. One is when someone buys a stock, they have to know when to sell it, right? You don't make a gain unless you exit the equity. And so one of the things I tried on people, and it worked really well, was for about between 11 and 8 months prior to legalization in Canada, every institution I went to, every institution that I wanted to invest, because we always needed money, I would tell them, I think you should sell half or more of the equity in my company 1 month before legalization. I said, well, shit, nobody ever comes here and tells us when to sell. I said, well, it's like a lot of things in life. Anticipation exceeds reality. However, the reality is that that's the instance, right? But if you anticipate something and you stay with it, the reality actually can become better than you expected. Otherwise, nobody stays married. But the key thing is, I said, you should sell my stock, half of it or more, a month before public. I said, well, why? I said, well, that whole story. And they said, well, we don't own it. I said, now I think I can have a meaningful conversation with you about how much you should buy. What percentage of the portfolio you should allocate to me, because you know your exit window. Now let's agree, if you think through what my logic is between now and that window, what's going to happen with legislation, what's going to happen with marketing, what's going to happen with media coverage, what's happening with globalization, why this is going to get super hot. And so I found that if you take a novel approach that provides an exit point, you can often find people who will enter who weren't going to. The final thing is, if you think it's kind of related, and I meant to do that, it's, when did Constellation put their big check in with us? About a month before the actual legalization, because everybody's worried about missing something. And over the medium term, they're already better off. But in the short term, people went, oh, why did you put your money in? Look at it, went up and went down. Who cares? They know this is not a one-year game. This is a lifetime game. And so they put their cash in long term, but it signaled to the market, get super excited. And so to me, the deal is, usually you want to deal on anticipation rather than factual results, because, every quarter changes. And I even now, like, look at some of the things I'm involved with now. Like, if you look at Gage Cannabis, I got my Cookies hat on, Cookies Detroit. I don't know if you can see it. It's a special limited edition. We began trading on Tuesday. Oh, it comes out of the gate, it goes up, then it goes down a bit. If you're smart enough to play the stock hour by hour, terrific, good to be you. But if you actually said, is Michigan an awesome market? Yep. Is having a leadership position in a state where there are no MSOs very important? Yes. Is having cookies sole and exclusive a very great way to have high value product? Yes. And so if you actually looked in it and said, my goal in stocks is to have 5 that I would like to own a lifetime, right? Like if you said, I really want to pick 5 things that I would like to own for a lifetime, maybe generationally, pass it on. That's how, to me, first you got to say, like, are the people running it that way? So I got involved with Gage purely because when I went to see them, I went around with a guy who'd spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure creation, having started off with crappy stuff we built and got better every iteration. What I saw at their place was like version 10 of our stuff. So they were thinking long-term. And so, like, when I see stocks trade up and down, I don't like deals that are for a press release. I like transactions that are durable. So that long blabbing, but like, you see a lot of people who want to put out news, right? Oh, we got to get news out. And how long news lasts? That's why they print it on paper. It's very thin, right? It's news because it's over that day.
Right.
I do not like press releases that are for news, and I don't like deals that, if anybody ever puts a press release out that announces a letter of intent, I would sell that stock instantly. And the reason is, you should only press release those things which are material and concluded, which inform the shareholder of your present state of value. If you put a press release out that says we might do something and people buy the stock and you don't do something, that's a disaster. So I like transactions rather than, deal flow and news. But I really think put a longer term horizon. I think one of the best transactions we did, nobody even still talks about, which was the acquisition of C3, which is the single biggest cannabinoid supplier in Europe, which was a division of a huge company. And they're very clinical, which is very European. And when Canopy puts the results out that says things are going well, I think places like, Storz and Bickel continue to contribute to that. But I think C3 is a big player on that. So, it's not as sexy, but it's very durable.
There you go. Wow. I tell you what, I need to start taking notes on just about everything you say. I heard about 40 things in there that made a lot of sense to me. David, I know you were busily working on some ideas, so you got something for Bruce? Go ahead.
No, Bruce, talk to the audience a little bit about some of the SPACs you've been involved with, And if I recall, CGROU was going to be looking at cannabis in Europe and ended up in LiDAR, right?
Yeah. It's sort of like, how do you go? You go out to buy a hemp pizza and come back in a driverless car.
Yeah, that was it. I bought it. I bought a bunch of that. So
let's begin the story. Special purpose acquisition companies. That's what it is called when it's called the SPAC.
Yep.
And the way it works is you are basically getting as much as you want to put in. So we raised 150 million US dollars and we're traded on NASDAQ. And that capital came from about, 20 institutions. And they buy these units. So it's a $10 share price. And what they get for that $10 is a share and a warrant. And the way it works is there's 50 plus days after it starts trading, they can sell the share and keep the warrant. Until then, they're stuck together. So think of it as one thing stuck together till about 54 days. Now it's two things. And so with that one, the people who put in the $10, they know we were looking at trying to do something with hemp. And what I did is we looked at 172 companies. And what we could not find was a single entity, which was substantial enough, because if I have $150 million cash, what I need to do is a transaction let's call it $1 billion. And the way that works is I'm not buying you for cash. I'm going to issue more shares and leave the cash in the bank. So after the transaction, the resulting company is publicly listed and has 150 million bucks in the bank. Now, the tricky bit is, so in hemp, there isn't something that big. So you start trying to think about, how do I put the pieces together to make something that big? And when you start looking at that, most of the little companies aren't ready to be public, meaning there's an accounting standard called PCAOB, which means you can report reliably your financial statements. So when we looked at all these places, you could maybe put about 5 things together, but then they wouldn't be ready to be public. And so what you have to do is at some point in time and say, well, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that cars could be made more lightly, not so heavy. Batteries better if you used hemp. Who's really good at that? BMW. They're very advanced in their technology, as you would expect for BMW. And then you start bumping into things, and it turns out the LiDAR company called Innoviz that we ended up doing the deal with is being built into the BMW cars. And if you bought a BMW electric car made in Germany, up to 21% of it's already made with hemp. And so you start saying, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then you say, well, who's the principal builder that's going to take the LiDAR system from Innoviz and put it in with BMW? And it's a Canadian company called Magna. They'd invested early in Innoviz. Well, because Canada is a small place, like if you said, do you know Joe from Canada? I probably do. And so it turns out like with one phone call, I can have a call with the CEO of Magna. And I can ask a bunch of questions about, why did you put the money in? Would you wish you had to put more in or less in that, so you can do your due diligence? And so what we realized was that this was probably, in my opinion, the most ready to be in market system being built into BMW cars right now that could go forward. And Elon made the right decision when he did his deals. He didn't have this technology at this price point. But with this stuff, he'd be wildly crazy not to upgrade to it. And so this looked like, to me, the winner, the leader, the potential to have drones to tractors to trailers being driven around with driverless. And it's out of Israel. It's super engineers who've done a bunch of things. So we did a transaction with them. And everyone who bought those $10 units sold the stock in January or so, because they could keep the warrant worth, say, $3, sell the stock for, say, $15, $16, $17. And now the warrant's worth maybe $3 to $4, and they think it's terrific. They wish I'd do another one. Now, one thing I should add, all those unit holders, if they didn't like the deal, could have voted in favor of it and asked for their $10 back, which would have meant Innoviz had no money. So the trick of the trade is that on top of your SPAC, your special purpose acquisition company, what you have to do is a secondary financing, which we did in January, called a PIPE. A PIPE stands for Private Investment in Public Equity. And so the effect of that is, we raised, and the guys did an amazing job. I barely was a part player. I'd show up and say, hi, I'm Bruce, kind of thing in these meetings. But they raised $232 million, I think was the final number. And that money for sure stays in the account. So when we started trading on Tuesday, they had over $300 million cash, a liquid stock, and are off to the races. And it was terrific because usually you have 24 months to do it. And we started trading on March 1st or May 1st, 2020. And as of Tuesday, so 4 or 5 days ago, they are listed and going. So it was quite a short time that we took to do that. And I almost did a second one. Like I might still, but I probably won't, because there's now been 600 or 700 of these things put out there. Like celebrities and sports people, they're all making SPACs. And what's going to happen is, I think there's going to be a log jam. And what I mean by that is, in about 6, 8, 10, 12 months, all these guys are going to be running around saying, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my money in another year if I don't do a deal. And they're going to give away everything to do a deal. And so what I'm thinking about is, how do I make a company? How do I put together the pieces I thought of before to make a company, so when these dum-dums are all out of time with all their cash, we can come in and help them not lose all their money, but we can make a whack of money by stepping in with a great company. And so SPACs are a very funny thing, but it's basically, Jimmy, here's the deal. They said, Bruce, we're going to give you $150 million. We're going to give you a liquid currency. Do you think you can make a deal? Jimmy, if I can't make a deal with those two combinations, please take my hat, take my glasses, take my computer. I'm retired.
Would you shave too? Would you shave too?
No, I'm going to a nursing home. I'm done. It's over. Like, you got a liquid stock and you got cash and you can't do a deal? Come on.
I guess so. Hey, hemp or cannabis? Which future is bigger and brighter in your estimation around the world?
So hemp, as designated to mean the stalk and fiber part, as well as the protein potential, is game changing on supply chains to create everything from the clothes you're wearing to the car you're driving. Game changing.
Right.
And it's going to change the agricultural landscape in America. It's going to change the sources of protein. So it's game changing. It's going to have a different margin model because you don't pay a zillion bucks for the bumper on your car, but it will change fiberglass to hemp. It has more categories of impact. I think the whole cannabis plant and all those cannabinoids, we saw the Jazz acquisition of GW, the potential for all of these things we call rare cannabinoids to become pharmaceutical components and ingredients, pet care. I think that is maybe not as big in total absolute dollars, but way bigger in profits. And, you know, just the global macro trade, like we're going to, in our lifetime, in almost every country on the planet, cannabis will be regulated. And when I say regulated, it'll either be medical or rec. And it's just because ignoring it is bad public policy. You do not make money as a government ignoring shit. That's right. And it's listen, there's three things to cannabis. They regulate, they tax, and they educate. That's all they're doing. Regulation, taxation, and education. And they have to do the education. They don't want to, but they can't make it look like Jimmy, when he was in grade 8, was going to go get stoned because they didn't educate. So they have to educate in order to cover their ass on the taxation. And so there's no governments, unless they have super deep oil fields in the Middle East or something, that don't need access to the flows of capital. So I think it's going to be, it's going to happen. And people go, well, listen, when New York State regulates, ask everybody on the planet, name one city in America, you're going to have like a 98% hit rate on New York as a city most people would reference. And New York as a city and a state is a globally iconic element. It has the media outlets that are covered. As this rolls out and people still show up at Wall Street and work, you know what's going to do? That is the sea change. It's not Colorado. It's not California. It's not some weird little state. This is New York. And I still find that it's been underreported in terms of, I think, the global impact of that decision on the public policy of the world.
Well, they're talking about creating a $4.2 billion industry in New York and looking at $350 million in tax revenue annually in that state alone. So how do you ignore that? You don't ignore it. It actually is moving the needle at every state. Almost every state in the union these days is looking at a way to get more tax revenue, to bounce back, have their economy bounce back. I mean, you talk about the perfect storm. It's the perfect storm of reality right now for the cannabis reform movement, because it can cure so many things, right?
Well, and when you say cure, most people who go to a doctor, the doctor studied at a time before the endocannabinoid system was actually validated as existing. And so I guarantee you those numbers do not capture the potential intellectual property torque and pharmaceutical value that's going to happen at Columbia and NYU and all the universities that have hospitals that can. So like, think about it. Like, your doctor was educated around the same time as somebody went, you know, there's this thing, I'm pretty sure, called an endo system. And so like when people say, well, we don't have medical, we don't have, I said, for God's sakes, like most doctors didn't even know the existence of this when they were in their academic fields. So like those numbers do not capture the torque. And, you know, I think when you think about the corridor on the East Coast between Massachusetts and New York, the potential for those institutions of, I'll call it pharma creation, the evolution of what these things are, the inspiration, they're just going to crush it. And I fundamentally think that, like, I'm a broken record on it, but if you can get somebody to have the munchies when they have an oncology treatment, that's unbelievable.
Right.
You can also, therefore, I suspect, pull the button and cause people to have a suppressed appetite without triggering the liver. So when you start to think about like what are the potential appetite suppression, weight loss, sleep, like, you know, most things that we treat are because we all get too fat. Like I had high blood pressure. You know why? I was 30 pounds fatter than I am now. You know what I found out is you have less blood pressure when you're less fat. So like all these things are going to start to weave together where we start thinking about inflammation, weight control, you know, all of the expression of those things in terms of medical ailments. If you could just treat, like COVID made me lose weight. Why? Because I wasn't on the road. Like I tried to deny myself nothing. Like you know, if you go to a restaurant and they're famous for making something, you should probably have 2 of them. And so being at home and like this restaurant, I told my wife I'm going to give the restaurant like 2 stars on TripAdvisor because I've been here for like 13 months and I've never at lunch been offered, would you like fries or salad? It's always salad. It's a very bad TripAdvisor review, but it, you know, all of the things that we could do with cannabinoids that I think will cause people to actually have a more healthy life state will then cause all of these things as we get older. Like the biggest market that's going to be impacted short term, I'll call it communal living, geriatric care. All these folks that died in long-term care facilities, we're also now saying, what the hell actually goes on in there? Like, how do you run them? What do you feed them? What medicines are they on? What exercise do they get? And so I think when we look at that, we're going to say, what, you're giving people like 3 or 4 drugs a day to deal with anxiety and mobility and appetite. Why don't we use cannabis? Right. $740 billion business just looking after old folks.
Right. And the fastest growing demographic group is the 50+ group in the cannabis space right now. Hey, Bruce.
Yeah, and you know what, Jimmy, if you want to bring cannabis successfully to, say, Japan, talk about how you help the people who are a little bit older.
Right.
You want to bring cannabis successfully to, say, the Middle East, talk about how you help horses recover from races and workouts. Because the horse population there, super well thought of, extraordinarily expensive, and a way in the door. So there's going to be on-ramps that are different by place, but they're not going to be all people rolling a joint.
I get you. Hey, I'm looking at the clock. Can you stick around for a little while to join the next half hour? Or do you have to run?
I'm good for like another 10, 15 minutes. With the amount you pay me, man, I just got to keep staying.
Hey, Jimmy,
yes,
let's just double his speaking fee for today, and let's keep him for another half hour.
All right, I want to know.
I can stay for at least another 15, and then I actually have a call with some Australians at 5 I got to get ready for.
Fantastic. All right, I get that. So we do take a break at 4:20, and I get to talk about the origination of the Waldos and the guys from San Rafael, California, who used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue. You know the whole origin, right, Bruce?
Snoop Dogg puts it out there every day.
I love that. Well, I do it every week at 4:20, but I tie it back to my own experience because here in the Boston area of Massachusetts, we used to listen to an AM daytimer back in the day that was alternative rock called WCAS AM 740. And they used to play this song Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. Now, do you know the song Shanty, Bruce?
I'm ready to hear it. I hope you got it queued up.
Yeah, of course we have it queued up. We're going to play it. You're going to listen to it. You're going to love it. The guy lives in New Hampshire to this day, and he's performing it at a radio studio in New Hampshire. We'll come back with more of Bruce Linton, and then we're going to add in a few more of these guys to the fun as we talk about the art of the deal on the Green Rush. Don't go away.